Sanctuary Hills, or Sanctuary, whatever you would like to refer to it as. Quaint as fuck, isn't it? Or at least it was before nuclear Armageddon had its filthy way with the place. It's the first and only area in the game before the war, and for most, the second area that will come to after. While a few centuries of war and terror, not to mention Codsworth's lackluster housekeeping, has ravaged the place, making it a shadow of its former self, the remains of some people's attempts to flee can still be found here, abandoned, with the whereabouts of their former owners mostly unknown. For now, anyway. Some of the houses are gone, as I needed the scrap and there was nothing in them, but some still stand, and it's these we shall take a look at today. The first house we come to is one immediately to our right, and like many, was an example of the House of Tomorrow, the futuristic homes that were taking off in Boston around the time of the war. This one is wrecked, and interestingly enough, actually looted, and not by me, which makes sense as raiders would have no reason not to pillage the fuck out of this place. All that is left in the way of possessions is a lone fishing pole. Also, it's highlighted because of the scrounger perk, before you all go asking why. I get this every single episode. Out the back of the house is the kennel where dog meat will reside in if you send him back there, just in case you're having trouble locating the furry bastard. A random bathtub is just lying in the street here, and in fact it's not the only time this happens here, which is weird. This next house is much like the first, for the most part. It's been cleaned out and there isn't much for us in the way of salvage. It does, however, offer us the only terminal in the whole of Sanctuary, and it can be found in this bedroom. There are 4 different sections for 3 different areas, and then some one-off jobs. This terminal belonged to a drug dealer in the business of happiness. The first section is on Sanctuary Hills, with the first entry on a man called Di Pierto, or however the hell it's pronounced, who is a customer of the dealer, and is apparently quite fat and jumpy. He actually makes it to Vault 111 and can be found dead when we wake up. The next customer is called Baker, and seems to be one of the paranoid variety, and takes Day Tripper every day. Rosa is one of his customers he's having trouble supplying. I assume the rationing is to do with the war, and as a result there's a shortage of buff out. She didn't make it into the vault, but this isn't the last we're going to hear of her. Jahani wants Psycho. Now before the war it was a military drug, so it would make sense that they wouldn't initially know what it is, or how to get their hands on it, and it's unknown if they ever did. It's odd that Jahani actually knows about it, and I have a theory on that we'll get to later. Lastly is Russell, and I assume his wife, and they owe the dealer for an XL delivery, and they suspect they use it on their dogs. It finishes with telling us the location of a safe we can break into and loot. Once again, Russell and his wife were one of the people who got into the vault, and as such, are dead. Next are the customers for Concord. First is O'Keefe, as the drug dealer puts it, pseudo-intellectual asshole, and he likes Daddy-O. Williams wants a lot of medics. Now, someone asked me if this could be the principal from Shaw, but the location and the names don't match, so for now I'm going to say no. The last one is from a girl called Anders, who wanted 20 blood packs for a prank. Now she was from Concord, so maybe when we take a look at it, we can find some evidence of the prank. Next up is Boston. The first is Isaac's. It seems to be a student who wants all the mental supplements they can get their hands on, most likely because the dumb shit is failing their classes and they're desperate. The Wards are a young couple that just want to get high every now and then. They seem like lovely people. McDermott's a cop, and it seems the buff-out rationing is affecting his ability to supply him as well, and the dealer worries that he will turn against him if he doesn't keep up the supply. Sapolsky is just an old woman who wants to get high, though the dealer finds it odd and they have to increase the order size, so maybe she's trying to overdose, I'm not sure. Lastly are the miscellaneous orders. First is Malcolm. Now given the name and they are from Charleston, I think they may be the same Malcolm we find in the Reed Marina, an area that we may one day cover. The last entry is about Duchesne, whatever. She's a model and wants stim packs. I'm not really sure why she would need that many, maybe to do with starving herself or some similar activity to keep her figure up and needs the stim packs to heal her. Well, that is all the entries. So of the 14 plus families that lived in Sanctuary, at least 5 of them were drug users. You think you know a person, then it turns out you don't. Entering the house next to this one through their garden, we can see it's a very American dream typical one. White picket fence, some chairs, barbecue, shit pink flamingos, the works. The inside's turned over just like the other 2 are, and doesn't have much in the way of loot again. I also want to point out here, the first house we went to was the one with a hidden safe, and therefore was where the Russells must have lived. The presence of the doghouse backs this up. The house next door to this one still has its car, and from the suitcase it looks like they were in the process of getting ready to flee in the car, though clearly they didn't manage that. The toilet here is bollocksed, and there is some filing equipment that looks out of place to me, but beyond that, there isn't much here. One house over is our house, the full-on house of tomorrow, though from looking at our shit back garden, you couldn't really tell. I ignore the wardrobe, it's where I hoard all my gear and stuff that I should throw away, but for some reason I find it very hard to do so. This was our living room, and as you know, it was not always shit. You can find an issue of Grognok Barbarian on the kitchen counter. Take it. In our laundry room, we can find a Mr. Handy assembly kit, which is where Codsworth came from. I wonder if this one was got from the General Atomics Galleria, which at the time of the bombs dropping had went tits up, and presumably just went out of stock, so this one could be one of the last ones they had. In our bathroom we find the mirror that created us, and if you weren't aware of what would happen, possibly your spouse as well, who was then promptly killed, wasting all that work. Our bedroom's quite small, and despite my manic feeling, I was not able to find out whether or not this picture was one of our family. Forgive me. In Sean's bedroom, we can find the special book, which we interact with at the start of the game. This room also serves as a reminder, and by that I mean a literal one. I constantly forget we even have a son, let alone that we're meant to be looking for him. I'm sure he's fine. The house opposite is where the majority of settlers set up shop when they first arrive, and as such, I will attribute its current state to them ballsing the place up. The room at the back has a packed suitcase, and the cabinet is turned over, with its contents strewn everywhere, so I think that the people that resided here were also in the process of making a swift exit. The yellow house opposite is actually very interesting. There's a dog bowl inside, so the family clearly owned one, and the volume of Halloween decorations makes me think they had children in the house as well, as adults would usually not be into it as much. A safe can be found in the room, and just opposite is what I assume was the child's bedroom. Single bed and all, which means we were fucking right. Nothing too much out of the ordinary there, eh folks? So this next one is probably the most interesting out of all of them, and I think it belongs to Jahani. Now some of the evidence for this is in the root cellar at the back, but we'll talk about what we know so far. Various construction tools can be found inside his house, suggesting he was working on something. A lot of supply boxes can be found here as well as ammunition, so he's clearly preparing for something, most likely the war. We know he has some level of military knowledge, as he knew about Psycho, which at the time of the bombs seemed to be classified, or at least not in the public eye. Also, the game files identify the cellar out the back as Jahani's, so this was his house. Speaking of the cellar out the back, let's go into it. It's hidden away behind the house, and unless you were looking for it, you'd walk right past it. Let's take a gander inside. So this is the root cellar shelter. Some supplies are stacked up along the walls, and feeble looking support beams are stuck into the roof. Beer and other food is also found here, so it's not a bad area to loot about at the start. 3 gold bars can be found by the safe as well, providing an excellent source of caps at the start of the game. The lights and radio are still powered, though I'm not sure by what. From the food and mess, I assume Jahani did make it down here, although I'm not sure what happened to him. Bullet holes can be found down here, and they were not my doing, I promise. So perhaps he was attacked, though nothing was taken, or he just shot the wall because he was bored. Okay, so next is the wrecked, or in my case completely salvaged, house next to Jahani's. Now there's nothing here at all, at first gander anyway. However, in the backyard, unless I'm mistaken, those are 2 graves. Now if we're still working on the assumption that mostly couples and families lived here, then this was most likely a couple. Question is, who buried them? As we'll see, not everyone who got caught outside the vault here died, Jahani not included, as we have already talked about him. Well, I still think it's a nice thing the person did. Also, I will admit, I tried to dig their bodies up. So now, there is but one house left, and this one is done right. Look at that, a proper fucking fortification attempt. Look, you've got your stacked chairs, repurposed kitchen counter, a sink, a fucking fine slapdash fortification right there. 10 of 10. Would kneecap people while crouching behind it like Gollum again. So this is either someone who survived and fortified the area for a bit, or someone who squatted here a while. Also, the people who did live here clearly had a child. though our child's bedroom is far superior. Also, look in this safe. You do not leave objects like this where a child proficient at lockpicking can get at them. So I am guessing a couple lived here, and that couple did not love their child. Well, that's it then. That is all of Sanctuary Hills to look at. Nothing more of interest. Wait, hold on, yes there is. Let's take a look at the survivors. So yeah, they didn't die. At random points in the Commonwealth, usually concentrated around the dockside of Boston, you may happen across a pack of ghouls that, oddly enough, all have names. Well, the reason they all have names is they're the remains of your neighbours, Rosa and Rosa's son, Mr. and Mrs. Donahue, and Mr. Sumner and his wife. They attack you and try to savage your face off. The few times I've encountered them, and yes, it does happen multiple times, for whatever reason, they're usually mauling raiders, and I approve of that wholeheartedly. Now, whether the process of ghoulification was a quick one or not, I'm not entirely sure. They all stayed together after centuries, so they must remember something of who they were. They were clearly not alone either, and isolation, as we discussed before, plays a role in going feral. I doubt it did here due to the fact that they were all still together, so the radiation must have turned them instantly. Also, I know about the salesman. We'll talk about him in a later episode, before you all jump in there like, but Elf, he did not succumb to the feral side of himself. I know. So, we most likely knew these people, and as their former neighbour, and possibly friend, it's our job to set them free. Sanctuary Hills, the community of tomorrow, the home of tomorrow. We settled down here with our spouse at some point and made a family, and all was well. Then the fucking bombs balls it all up. Many of our innocent neighbours perished. Some spent centuries roaming the waste, still together with their loved ones. Some, like Jahani, not really sure how to pronounce that one, built a decent enough shelter, though I'm not sure how long it lasted. One sold drugs and many took them, and if my count was correct, over a third were users. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. Some, like ourselves, made it into the vault, and ironically enough, almost as many of us died as those outside, with only 2 of us getting out. In the end, we returned here to start our journey, our quest, to find our son, which, you know, sort of begins about every 5 to 10 minutes when I actually remember we have one and we're meant to be looking for him. It's alright though, I'm sure he's fine. Probably. A decent enough hilltop community, and the alright to possible addicted people that live there. I hope you liked this look at all of it. If you did like it, give the video a like, and if you want regular updates, subscribe. Any suggestions for lore or future videos should be left in the comments below. Better yet, go onto my subreddit, so we can discuss them in more detail. It's linked in the description. If you wish to, you can support me on Patreon, which is also linked in the description. Go have a gander at the rewards. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook to get regular updates, or have a wee chat. Any business you wish to discuss, email me at thenthapple.business@gmail.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, goodbye.